Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 194. Don, November's here, and we are in a makeshift Steve Shield studio at your office with, obviously, in your trophy room here. Steve is running out the door to go back home, but he put these big sun lamps on us, and it's a little odd, honestly. We're used to staring at each other at a computer.
There's a reason Steve is the video guy and I'm not, because I just put the camera on auto and I point it and turn it on.
Yeah,
Steve, it's a production. It's a major production.
He is not here. He just literally walked out the door, but before he left, he wanted to set this up. So, hope you guys enjoy it. We're going to be doing a podcast in person tonight, talking about the rut. You've been doing a rut report here since let's kick it off with that. Tell us how the rut's been going, and then transition that conversation into your second target buck was killed here on the farm.
Right. So, we started off on fire. This rut, we had that cold front there about Halloween, maybe a day or so before Halloween, and the bucks were absolutely going crazy. And now we're on a warm front, and the temperature today was probably in the 60s, I would guess, but Wednesday here at home, it's supposed to be 76 degrees. And it's supposed to be in the 70s actually the first half of the week. And then on Thursday, a cold front comes through and it's going to totally change things. But right now, it's warm as can be. It's been crazy because yesterday I seen more midday movement on my cameras than I've ever seen in one midday. I mean, there was bucks running everywhere from 10 to 2. And there was decent movement morning and evening both, but that midday activity was basically more than the morning and evening put together. So, but today that totally changed. There was almost no midday movement. The morning movement was pretty good. The evening movement I thought was terrible.
I'm really interested a couple weeks ago, I think it was 2 podcasts ago, we asked everybody if they saw that on their trail cameras. And did you notice how many people from all over the country, people from Tennessee and South Carolina were talking, I forget what was the date, October 13th?
23rd.
23rd, I had the 3 right. So today is what day? November 4th. So if you guys saw a bunch of daylight movement on November 3rd, see if you guys saw that on your trail cameras. I'm really interested because there's so many people that listen from other areas outside of the Midwest. Did you guys see daylight movement? And I remember in the rut report last night, you said it'll be interesting to see what today is. Mm-hmm. And it was exactly flip-flopped.
Yeah, it was. And I started the rut report. And the crazy thing about this rut report, it's not really crazy, I guess it's actually expected, is that what I've seen over the years as I've done the rut report is that people in Ohio, Pennsylvania, they will, whatever I report that I seen that particular day, they report that they see the very same thing the next day. Yeah, or 2 days later when you start getting out on the eastern side of Pennsylvania. But the Ohio people see it a day later. And I guess it's to be expected with the weather patterns coming from west to east. Well,
let's talk a little bit about weather, and then we'll talk about the buck that was shot here this week. For those of you who always ask us about when do I take my vacation, I think this week is a perfect example if you have an employer that lets you be a little bit flexible with your vacation. Because right now, I came up last night after work, Friday night after work, hunted today, going to hunt Sunday, and I'm scheduled to take Monday through Wednesday off. We got highs in the high 70s, not the low 70s. It's 78, 79. But what I don't like is the low is like 58. Is that what we saw? Mm-hmm. So I'm really concerned about the movement really being minimized during daylight hours, Monday through Wednesday. And Patrick and I are going to talk later tonight and tomorrow about possibly shifting our vacation instead of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, shifting it at least Thursday, Friday on that cold front. I realize that a lot of you guys take vacations and have to plan them a year in advance, and you have to hedge your bet, and you look at the moon guide and all that. But man, it's happened to me so many times. You pick a week, and it just happens to be one of those warm fronts that come through and really pigeonhole you. So if you have that job that has a little bit of flexibility, it's a huge bonus.
No doubt about it. The 2023 season, especially the rut, is setting up a lot like 2020 when I shot Mel. So in 2020, we had that cold front that came through at the end of October. I shot him on the morning of October 30th, and I think I seen 8 bucks that morning up cruising before shooting Mel. And then after I shot Mel, we got into November and a warm front came through and it shut it down. And we talk about weather trumps everything. Weather even trumps the rut movement. We're seeing that again this year. So we had that great cold front about Halloween, and then now we've got the warm front coming behind it, and it shut things down. But the good thing is that this year we got another cold front coming at the end of the week.
Yeah, so like I said, if you have flexibility with your schedule and you're looking for some days to take off now that we're in this full first week of November, really look at what the weather pattern is going to be. And 70s doesn't bother me that bad, honestly. If it spikes up to 70 in the middle of the day, that doesn't bother me as much as long as it's still really cold at night. And it gets cold because you're getting your temperatures dropping really hard on the other ends. But man, when it's not even hardly going to get out of the 60s at night, I'm really rethinking my game plan here.
Well, there's no doubt that it shuts down deer movement. I mean, they're still going to move, but they're not going to move like if it's a little bit colder than normal for that time of year.
Like tonight was a perfect example. So we sat together in the smoky blind, which is usually fantastic for deer movement. We saw 2 does, probably 2.5 hours before dark, come out and feed. And then we saw a button buck, and that was it. But 500, 600 yards away, Steve Shields was sitting in another blind, and even though the deer movement didn't start early, he saw a lot more deer. Talk a little bit about, everybody says the rut's on or the rut's completely off, and we are literally within 500, 600 yards of each other and saw a completely different thing with the same wind.
On the same property.
Yep.
So if a person would ask us about the rut, we would say they're not doing anything. Steve would say the opposite. But both of us, you and I sitting in the one blind, Steve sitting in the other blind, we did not see an antlered buck. And that is crazy for this time of year. You would think there'd be at least a 1.5-year-old buck out bumping these does around, but that was not the case this afternoon.
So you didn't hunt this morning. You had a little side project that you were working on. We're going to hunt the next couple days. But let's take a quick break. We're going to do our Osseo featured spotlight tonight. Since obviously we're not sitting in front of our computers, you're going to see it. But I'm going to show this picture to Don. He has not seen it yet. This week's spotlight came from Brian Lemke of the Deer Society. He killed this monster Minnesota buck on October 29th. Don, I'm going to hand you this phone. Talk a little bit about what everybody's seeing on the screen here. This is the first time you've seen it.
Wow. The first thing I'm going to say is this guy somebody takes fantastic photos. This is the type of photo that should be taken to properly basically give respect to the game that we pursue. You notice there's no blood on this photo, just a very classy photo, first of all. And that's what jumps out at me. But this buck has a 6x6 mainframe, good brow tines, a couple stickers off the G2s. Definitely a booner. I'm going to guess this buck has got to be pushing, he's over 180 for sure, probably pushing 190, maybe over 190, but
only one view, it's hard to tell, but
right.
he's got a little bit of everything there.
But that picture is absolutely breathtaking. That is the type of picture that a mature buck deserves.
Yeah, so congratulations on just an absolute awesome buck. Great pictures. Look at the background too. I really like that. Let's see here. He was wearing the Sherpa jacket and pants. That's what we wore tonight. Yep. So that's the perfect mid-season jacket when it's not cold enough to break that heavy stuff out. Going in even down into the 40s. I don't mind wearing it into the 40s.
Right.
And I get cold really easy. I got really low blood pressure, so it doesn't take much to get me cold. But check out the Sherpa series, which is what this gentleman and both Don and I, probably my favorite garment out of the Osseo Spotlight or product line. So let's transition, Don. Let's jump right into it because I want to leave room for the questions. You had a goal. You said on this podcast you wanted 2 bucks taken off of this property.
Right.
And obviously one of them was Babe. The other one was shot in the middle of the week. There's really 2 storylines here that I want to dive into, and I wanted to leave time for this. The first one is, Why did you want 2 bucks, specific bucks, taken off of here before that? Because you put a target on it, November 1st. Why was that so important for your overall strategy?
Well, I wanted those bucks off of the farm before the rut took place, before the actual breeding took place. And both of those bucks do not display the type of antler traits that will allow a buck to score really high. So, we had the giant 8-point. I think we've showed photos. I know I've showed photos on my social media. I think we've showed some on the podcast as well. But just a big old 8-point frame, had really nice brows. But that buck fooled me, and we'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about the hunt. But the other thing is I've got 4 up-and-comer bucks that I'm hoping survive. And I know these older bucks that we shot, Babe's 6.5, this big 8-point was 5.5. They're going to put pressure on these young bucks. The ones I want to save are 3 and 4-year-olds. And if every time they show up on the farm, there's a 5 or 6-year-old pushing them around, they're going to wander off, and the odds of getting killed are pretty good. So by getting rid of these older bucks before the rut, I'm hoping that these better younger bucks stick around and not only survive, but I hope they breed the does on the farm. Yeah. So that was the key. We didn't quite meet the goal of getting them off of here by October.
Missed it by 1 day.
Missed it by 1 day.
Before you move on to tell a little bit about the story, Don, I want to talk a little bit about, so it goes back to Dr. Strickland talks about this glass ceiling we create, and it takes years to do this, right?
Yep.
You and Dr. Strickland were basically doing the same thing and didn't know the other ones. He wrote a book on it. You were practicing it here. And I was actually there the night that you put him on the spot and said, this is what I've been doing on this property. Does it hold any water? And he said, I wrote a book on it. Actually, it was on a Teams call. We weren't in person when it happened. And I felt really embarrassed because, I should have done a better job researching his work, to be honest with you. But I think it's just fantastic that we've changed this mentality on your farm to not really as much make target buck, but identify bucks that can't be shot. And you were going through showing me, before I came up here, all of the bucks that are okay to shoot. Some of them are young, some of them are old, but there was some that were on the do not fly zone. And you really don't care what gets shot, except for a couple ones that were the priority, as long as there was a couple, the up-and-comers, that says that's no fly zone. Right. And I think that's really a mentality that's hard for people to grasp. It's not about what bucks we want to shoot, but what bucks we want to live, and then take everything else so the pressure allows them to stay and flourish.
Well, I'm going to get really controversial here. Okay. I don't shy away from controversy.
No, not.
There's the thought process out there that you cannot change the genetics of a wild deer herd. And I agree with that to some extent. But something that I've noticed lately is I've seen in recent years, I've seen a lot of spike bucks. And I've been deer, this is my 46th season. And I remember back 30 years ago, I'd never seen a spike. I don't know how many years I hunted and never seen a spike. In fact, I never seen a forkhorn. Every yearling buck back then would have 6 points was probably the average.
You're talking about little things like this.
Yeah, little yearling, the first rack.
Okay.
Little bitty 6-point or 8-point racks. But now I see more and more spikes. And even forkhorns, but a lot of spikes. And I bet I hunted for 25 years before I ever seen a spike buck. Of course, I'm in the Midwest. I'm in a
sure.
And at that point, the Illinois deer herd was the best managed deer herd on the planet.
That's in its prime.
In its prime, and the poor management is reflected in the genetics that are surviving. We're high grading each age class of bucks, and if you think about it from an agriculture standpoint, and I think that's the approach that I brought to managing my property is, I've always had livestock, always had cattle all my life. Well, a cattle farmer is not going to every year go out and pick the worst bull calf and I'm going to use him to breed. And then next year's calf crop, well, there's the worst calf out there, he's going to breed. And that's what we're doing with the wild deer herd, because we're shooting the best bucks in every age class at younger ages. And I've used this example many times. If a deer hunter's sitting in his tree stand, the average deer hunter, he's sitting in his tree stand, and out in the field in front of him walks two bucks. One of them's an 8-pointer that scores about 120 inches.
Right.
The other one's a 10-pointer that scores 150 inches. But they're both 3-year-olds. Which one gets shot?
It doesn't matter if they're 3-year-olds or not. It's
but
the bigger one's getting shot every time.
Every time. And it could be that 150-inch 10-pointer, he could be a year or two younger than the one with the smaller rack. And that's been our mentality as hunters, is we want to shoot the biggest buck.
Right.
And we do so without regards to how we're affecting the herd as a whole. And on my farm, I've tried to reverse that. I've tried to use the lessons I've learned from livestock management, and it goes right with Dr. Strickland. I mean, he backs me up 100%. He's wrote a book on it. That I try to leave the very best 1 or 2 bucks in each age class on this farm, and I try to shoot the bottom 2/3. Right. And it pays off.
So your November 1st timeline, if I'm hearing you right, there was 2 goals in that. Number 1, you wanted specific bucks having more opportunities to breed. Number 2, sometimes those lower scoring older bucks will push off genetically superior younger bucks. So when they're all fighting for their does and everything, that stud 3-year-old might be pushed over to the neighbors where he's going to get shot every time. Whereas and that November 1st was the key, because you wanted that buck not to get pushed and you wanted that buck not to breed.
And you know, again, the haters are going to come out of the woodwork on this rant that I'm kind of on. It's not really a rant, but Dr. Strickland backs up what I'm saying. But I want to be very clear that my method of managing is not going to work on every property. In fact, the majority of deer hunting properties across the country, it's going to have 0 impact. You're going to have 0 impact on the genetics of your wild herd. But my property is isolated, surrounded by miles of open ag fields. And I've seen it. People can argue with me all they want. I've seen it firsthand. I've done it on this farm for 30 years. I've grown 2 200-inch bucks here. It had absolutely nothing to do with anything except the management of that wild buck herd. Now, I'm providing all the nutrition those deer could need as well, but I'm letting the very best bucks in every age class reach maturity to the best of my ability, and I'm killing the lowest ones. And you can't change genetics per se, but you can influence which bucks survive and which ones don't.
And I guess the thing that first comes to my mind about, isolation, the reason is that people sitting on your property line, this isn't going to work.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, most people's normal situations with permission properties and small acreage, even though you don't have a lot of acreage, there's a lot of buffer. Most people don't have that. If you're sitting on a 2,000 acre ranch somewhere that nobody's close, that's a different story. I think about Wes Delks. He's building, I think he's even called it, what is he called it? Higgins 2.0, I believe, off the top of my head. He went out, that property wasn't even for sale, and he started looking for isolated cover with a lot of distance between anything, and he's building that now. I think this is it year 3?
I think so.
And he still has yet to hunt it.
Right.
That's the interesting thing. So as Wes is out with his consulting clients, I think that's a lot of the methodology he's using. So now we can transition to this actual hunt.
Yep.
All right. So it's a little bit different approach. You've had kind of a change of heart. We talked about it in the blind today, and I really want you to share this, because how you made the decision of handling some of this hunt actually came from Bible study this summer with you reading the New Testament. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, I see my property as a blessing. I've been extremely blessed to own this property and develop it into one of the best deer properties in North America. And I feel as a Christian that it's very important that we share our blessings. For one thing, I think, God, trusts us with a little to see how we handle that before he gives us a lot. And it's important to me that I share that blessing. And in the past, what I've tried to do is find young men who had an interest in deer hunting, take them hunting on my farm, allow them to shoot a buck or two on my farm, try to mentor them and bring them into the Christian fold, if you will.
Yeah.
Try to change their heart and get them to become Christians. And to be honest, I've had very little success. And then this summer, as I was reading the New Testament, and I've read it, before, but I read it again, and one of the things that really stood out to me was Jesus told his disciples, as he was sending them out, in their ministries, that there's going to be certain cities where the message is not going to be received well. And he tells them just to leave, but he even goes a step further. He says, when you leave those cities, shake the dust off of your feet. Just have nothing to do with them.
Yeah. Leave everything behind. Don't worry about it. Leave everything behind.
Right. So, I pondered on that a lot this summer because, I was having no success bringing these young guys in that were not Christians and getting them to become Christians.
Well, you even had some blow up in your face.
Yeah.
You've let people here hunt that didn't turn around and make accusations about what the property is, even that. So, I mean, that's really going to get your blood pressure boiling. But you've had all different situations of people that you've tried to do a good thing with the property, and it didn't pay out as a ministry like you wanted.
And I think I opened my eyes this summer as I read the New Testament again, that you can't convert everyone's heart. And I think for me to best utilize my blessing, this property, I needed to be a little more selective about the young men that I brought in. And so I decided, instead of bringing in these guys that were not Christians, that first I wanted to see a commitment out of them. And there was a young man at my church, Kent Tabor, that he started going to church there about 2 years ago. And a good all-around outdoorsman. The guy finds over 1,000 mushrooms every spring.
Oh, wow.
Catches crappie right and left. He shared his mushrooms with me 3 or 4 times last spring at church. He would bring me a bag of mushrooms. That goes a long way.
The way to Don's farm is through his belly.
And has given us crappie fillets more than once. And I seen in him, an opportunity to. I kind of struggle with the right word, maybe mentor him and show him that I've had struggles in my life too. From the outside looking in today, it looks like, man, Don's got it made. He's got a dream job. He's living in a nice new home. He's got this great hunting property. Got all these followers. Got his own podcast, followers on social media. It looks like he's just got it made. And I like to share the backstory, that Don didn't always have it made. I've had my struggles. I've had my issues, some of them self-inflicted. I'm a sinner like everybody else. I've got my faults. And when you get one-on-one with a young man in a deer blind, it's an opportunity to share that. Don't look at somebody else and just start assuming that they've got it made. They had struggles too to get to where they are today. And I like to use my story as an encouragement for these guys and hope that I can keep them on the right track. Before, I was trying to take people and get them on the right track. So now I'm taking guys that are already on the right track, and I'm trying to keep them there. I'm trying to get them to see the big picture, the long haul. And, I can tell you that, so Kent and I went hunting for, I think he ended up shooting that buck on about the 4th or 5th hunt. And I promise you, he's seen some things from a deer stand this week that he'd never seen before in his life. And there was one hunt, I think we seen 7 bucks. We had bucks in front of us posturing and grunting and making noises that he told me. I said, I'd never heard that noise before. Right in front of us, 15 yards. And but the big thing is that we had a chance to get to know each other better on those hunts. And then on, I forget what evening it was. I think it was Wednesday evening, maybe.
Yep.
We was out we just got into the blind. In fact, Kent climbed up in the blind before I did, because I had a trail camera on a tree right out in front of the blind. And I told him, I said, you go ahead and get up there. I'm going to change the card in this trail camera. So I changed the card, and I climb up in the blind. And as I'm climbing up, I see this deer kind of trot away through the branches of the trees. And I get up there and he says, "Did you see that doe?" And I said, "No." And he said, "There was a doe standing right there watching you change that card in that camera." And he says, "I got the video right here on my phone. He filmed that doe watching me change that card in that camera." Well, I can't believe she didn't blow out of there, first of all. That was just a miracle in itself. But the doe trots away, but then she comes running back because there's all these bucks chasing her. And she obviously was about to come in heat. And one of the bucks that was chasing her happened to be the big 8-point that I wanted killed on this farm. And got some great video footage of this buck coming in. He went past us, and then he hooked back around in front of the blind. And when he did, I had the camera rolling. You know, Kent's there with his bow, and he comes to full draw, and this buck's about to, I wasn't sure if it was going to stop. And I let out a grunt with my mouth and stopped it. And he put a perfect hit on this deer. I mean, absolutely perfect hit. And the buck bust out of there. So after the shot, you know, he was just fired up as could be. He just, "Hey, I can't believe it. I can't believe it," and thanking me and everything. And we gave the deer probably 30 minutes or so. Even we knew it was a good hit. But then we blood trailed it and found it a short distance later. He piled up in the switchgrass. But it was just perfect. You know, we got the 2 bucks that I wanted to get out before the rut, before they could breed does, before things really heated up and they chased off those good young up-and-comers.
You know, I think the lesson of using, not to turn this into church, but one of the things I think we're guilty of as Christians, whether you're in church every Sunday or maybe you're older and you can't go to church and it's virtual church or whatever, but I think we see someone who starts trying to do the right thing and we forget about encouraging them. And I think Satan comes in and grabs us. That's when he's probably working the hardest, is when somebody's just converted and you know, trying to do the right thing, but he's still trying to get pulled back. And not saying that by your friend, I'm not implying that, but using something to not only witness to others and be a disciple, but also encourage young Christians. I know we got the text after the shot, and it was like the ultimate win-win, because you had this young man that was that the biggest buck he'd ever shot.
Oh yeah.
So you know, his biggest buck, he's probably shaking so bad that the blind's probably rattling. You know, he's so fired up. But then for you to be able to accomplish your goal, to where that shot right there changed that guy's life, you know, from not only a discipleship standpoint, but get him even more addicted to deer hunting. But what that could potentially do in 2 to 3 years on this farm by keeping that social environment of the deer herd, especially the bucks, here. So that one act of discipleship that you showed with that young man made a difference in his life and might make an absolute huge difference to this farm. People don't realize the impact that might have with the young up-and-comers that you have here.
Yeah, he looked at it like I was doing him a big favor. He couldn't stop thanking me for, you know, allowing him to come here and hunt with me and shoot that buck. And yeah, I was sharing my blessing, but he was doing me a favor too, because I had 1 buck tag left, and I'd burned my first one on Babe, and I didn't want to burn my second one on this buck and be done for the season. So he was doing me a favor, I was doing him a favor, but it gave us a chance to sit in the blind, get to know each other a little bit better. And, you know, I just got high hopes for that young man. I think that he's going to do big things. I think that the example that I'm trying to set hopefully will, you know, take root with him, unlike it has with some other guys I've tried to help.
Well, and, you know, it's not that we're not trying to disciple or not trying to help, but where we use and pick and choose to share blessings, I think, I know it sounds selfish, but I also think we have to be guarded, because there's going to be a list of people on this YouTube channel that says, I'll come shoot it, I'll come shoot it. But, you know, in all things we do, we need to use it for the kingdom. And when you see an opportunity, I think that's a tug that God does, where it's just like an open door, where we talked about it in the blind today. We spent probably an hour talking about my career change. All of those things kind of work together, and God presents opportunities. And I think when you feel called, it's not to say I can say you're right or wrong, but you felt called to do this with this young man, and you want to continue to do this with this property, I think that's walking through a door that God presents, and He's going to glorify that for our good and His glory. On the Chasing Giants prayer time a couple weeks ago, Devin Hurley talked about in all things is for our good and His glory if we let Him open doors and we're willing to walk through it.
Yeah, the situation on this farm, I've been taking others hunting here, even total strangers, for many years.
There's a lot of people that hunt this farm. People don't realize how many people hunt this farm.
But I've seen people, I want to be careful how I word this. I've seen people take advantage of that generosity too. And, I just leave it at that. I've seen people take advantage of that generosity. And so I'm being very selective about who I'm taking now.
I think they have to live with that guilt. If they have it or not, that's on them. But I think we just like we have to be fiscally responsible with our household income or with our work priorities and time management. You have to be a good steward of what you're provided and what God's blessed you with. And I think that's what this change of heart and how you've kind of rethought how you're doing it is being a good steward of what God has blessed you with. So very cool story. Now let's talk about the buck, because both of us were completely. This buck, I've known this deer for quite a few years. When I first saw him as a young one, I was like, holy cow, this frame could be something special. He really never developed into anything other than a big wide frame. But if you've seen the pictures of it, his brow tine, how far, did you measure how far apart his brow tines were?
I didn't.
His brow tines were almost as wide as his ears. So I'm thinking probably 14 to 15 inches apart were his brow tines. That's how big wide frame he had on this thing.
Yeah, I got the pictures last summer, and it was just unbelievable. And I've never had a buck ever throw me off what he could score as much as this one did. I thought he's definitely over 100 all summer long. Of course, he's in velvet, and they look bigger. I'm thinking definitely over 160 as an 8-point, probably pushing 170. Well,
the July picture made him look huge.
Yep.
We shared that picture, and even Joe Miles was like, oh.
Yeah.
But you got him on the ground, and...
Well, he took great pictures. They say photos add 20 pounds to people. Well, they added 20 inches to this buck. And we walked up to him in the prairie grass, and, Kent's just proud as can be, and he's grabbing that big old... And it's a
huge frame.
It's a huge frame. But he didn't have any mass, and his tines weren't that long. He had long brow tines, but his other tines weren't that long.
Longest tine was, I think, 10.
Right.
Weak G2s.
Yep.
And on an 8-pointer, you got to have it all.
Right. So I ended up scoring him, and he scored 146.
Yeah.
And I would have swore, even when that deer was coming at us and I'm running the camera, he was coming through the real world soybeans, chasing that doe around, I thought, that's a 160-inch deer. And then to measure him, a couple days later, and he's 146, I'm like, I've never been that far off on a deer. Yeah. Babe, for example, I've made it I've said publicly, that deer scores within 2 inches of 180, either side. He scored 181 and 2/8. Never have I been as far off as I was on that buck, but great buck nonetheless. If you'd see him, he takes a great picture.
Well, even when he gets mounted, he's going to look bigger than what he is because of this huge frame. And that's what makes big 8-pointers so special. Mm-hmm. They got to have mass, they got to have frame, and they got to have tine length. And without all of it, it's really hard to get an 8-pointer in the 160s.
It is. And I would have bet the whole farm that he would have done it.
All right. Well, congratulations to our friend. I get to see him at church tomorrow, hopefully. So. Yep. I'll be able to congratulate him. So let's move forward to our listener submitted questions. This is going to be a little bit different. Don has them printed out on a piece of paper. I'm going to have time to put them on the screen as he's reading them, and then we'll answer them as we go.
All right. The first one comes from Levi Yoder from Cynthiana, Kentucky.
That's where my hometown.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's where I grew up. I don't know Levi Yoder, but hey, Levi Yoder. I went to Harrison County High School, so.
He says, "Hey Don, you recently said something on a podcast about giving away your new Matthews bow.
Oh.
Then you pose with Babe and there's an older bow in the picture. Could you please elaborate on why you choose to shoot an older bow over a new one? Thanks." Well, Levi, you're not the only person that caught this in the picture, and that's why I picked this question, because I've got this question a lot.
Yeah.
So what happened was I had the men's retreat at my church back in September, and it was an outreach ministry. We was trying to encourage men to show up, and I was the speaker, and as one of the items we wanted to give away to help encourage people to come was I said, I'm going to give away my new Matthews bow. And
can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yep.
Your new Matthews bow was the one you used last year.
Right.
So just so everybody's aware, Don is on the short list of people that gets the bow that isn't released till the winter. He gets it in the early fall so he can hunt with it all year. There's not very many people in the industry that get that. So this bow that he's talking about was what you used last year, which was the Phase 4, which is the current model. Sorry, I just want everybody to understand that. So your new bow, you had it and used it this last hunting season.
Right. So it was a year old to me. I'd got it a year earlier. Again, released to me a little bit early by Matthews, which I greatly appreciate, by the way. So we don't sell our bows. When we get a bow from Matthews and they give us a new one, we take our old one and usually donate it to some kind of charity event.
Give it to somebody, raffle it off, whatever.
Yeah, so that's what I did at this men's event in anticipation that Matthews was going to get me my new bow for this season 2023, a model that has not been released yet. Was
be here before the season.
It was expected to be here before October 1st. Well, that didn't happen. I did end up getting a new bow from Matthews, but it was after season was already open. So a few days before season, I just, out of desperation, I grabbed my old bow and took it out and started shooting it to make sure, it was all...
so the old Z series was still a tack driver when you
Z9,
pulled it out.
I went out there with that Z9 and the first 3 arrows was like this.
Yeah.
And I hadn't touched that bow since I don't even know when it was. Actually, I don't even know when I shot that bow.
Probably 3-4 years. At least 3.
It's been a while, but I grabbed that bow and the first 3 arrows, and that thing has been my favorite Matthews that they ever made. Hands down.
The thing about it is you made the decision very early to promote the men's fellowship event and thought that this would be a good way just as a keepsake and kind of a prize to provide. And, delays are delays. You ended up getting it, but you had to be dialed in. So Matthews, was told, what was going on and they understood. But I've actually held the new bow. It's out in the garage. We can't talk about it, but you're all going to learn about what next year's bow is. But, by the time all of that happened, the Z9 was still slinging darts, so it's a testament about how good that brand has been for so many years. But it's actually a really great question, and I know there's a lot of people that are in this industry that get product comp as part of their package, and that's obviously something we much appreciate when companies have faith in us to represent their brand. But one thing that we are a little bit different on, when we get something that we don't pay for, I personally, I'm not judging someone if they do. I don't like selling it. It was a blessing to me. Make it be a blessing to someone else. And, that's what you tried to do with this. It's just the timing was kind of quirky this year.
Yeah, and, in Matthew's defense, they've got a limited number of these bows manufactured. They've been a fantastic sponsor. And that Z9, I don't even remember what year that thing came out. But I know when it comes down to crunch time, I can grab that bow off the hook and I'm going to put that arrow where it belongs. Yeah. And I think that, I'm just brutally honest, folks, and that's why I'm answering this question. I think the game we pursue deserves us to be as proficient as we can be with our weapon. And for me to, in mid-season, to grab a bow I've never shot before and all of a sudden try to become proficient with that bow, after season's open, I just think the game deserves more respect than that.
You went with what you were confident with.
Yep.
So, but hope that answered your question. We've been asked that a lot. We're not here to hide anything. I mean, you could have technically done the switch in the picture, but that's not right either. Because we're obviously going to produce the video of you shooting it, so that's in the footage. So, great question, Levi. Next time I'm over at the hilltop, hopefully I get to meet you one day.
I have no idea where Cynthiana, Kentucky's at.
Just east of me.
All right.
Not far away.
I'll let you handle that. Next question. Adam Cates from Gardner, Kansas says, Don and Terry, thanks for the great podcast. Don, this question is for you. Whatever came of your pumpkin patch planting for the deer? I thought it was a great idea as deer love pumpkins. Well, Adam, I tried to plant them pumpkins in my corn patch, if you'll remember. And they did not do well because of the residual herbicide that I'd put down on my corn when I planted it. And I was going to grow pumpkins in my plots for the deer, but learning something from our general manager, Janice, actually started me thinking different. So Janice she went to the University of Illinois and has an agronomy degree. So she knows what she's talking about. She studied this stuff. And she was telling me when they did studies at the university on corn rootworms, they would plant pumpkins because pumpkins attracted rootworms. Well, if you're using a corn that's genetically modified to be rootworm resistant, it's probably not that big of an issue. But the NutriCrave corn is non-GMO, so it's susceptible to rootworms. And learning that and the effect that rootworms can have on a corn crop, I just have kind of shied away from the whole pumpkin idea. I do think it has its place. If you're not growing corn on your farm, then by all means you probably should be planting some pumpkins somewhere, just to see if the deer in your area are going to like them. But that's why I backed away, is because I think that NutriCrave corn on my farm is so important to get my deer through the winter in the best shape possible, that I was not willing to sacrifice my corn for the sake of the pumpkins.
Yeah. We have a very good friend of ours that goes to church with us that owns a kind of a pumpkin patch fall festival type place. Mm-hmm. And their biggest thing is crop damage to the pumpkins for this business from the deer. So working agriculture farm, and they say they tear them up. So big problem for them. So there's got to be something there for food plotters that want some more diversity. I wonder if you could put pumpkins out and then have like a big heavy caliber rifle at a select moment with a suppressor and blow them up, and just open them up for the deer to eat. Make it be a little bit easier. That sounds a little redneckish, doesn't it?
Well, you might even be able to train those deer to come running when they hear a gunshot. Instead of running away, have them run at the gunshot, because they know there's going to be a pumpkin waiting.
There you go.
Yep. All right, next question comes from Matt Fueling from Becker, Minnesota. He says, Don and Terry, I'm a huge fan of you both and the Chasing Giants podcast. In the last few weeks, I worked out a deal with the farmer who farms the permission ground I'm on in Minnesota, and he's going to leave me 25 to 30 acres of standing beans.
Wow.
With the drought conditions this summer, the beans didn't grow well and got really weedy, so I got a reasonable deal. I recently noticed the bean pods are beginning to crack and a lot of the beans are laying out on the ground. Did I just waste my money now that a majority of the beans fell out of the pods? Will they start to rot? Would I still have this issue if I were to purchase real-world beans in the future? I was really hoping to have a great late-season food and to hold the deer this winter, as I'm also a big shed hunter. I think I may even give your good friend Joe Johnson a run for his money. Any words of advice would be appreciated. Well, Matt, I can tell you that typically, if you're going to leave 25 to 30 acres of soybeans, you're going to have deer coming from miles away when the weather gets bad. The shatter, that's what it's called. When the soybean pod bursts open and the soybean grain goes out on the ground, that's called shatter. That pod shatters open and drops the grain. that was an issue that I had years ago on my farm. That was actually the whole basis behind starting Real World Wildlife Products. The first product that I wanted was a soybean that did not shatter.
Yep.
And I didn't even set out to have a food plot seed company when I was looking for that soybean. But once I found it, and other friends and people that heard about it wanted to know what soybean I was planting that didn't shatter, that led to one thing led to another, and that's where Real World actually started. So one thing we need to stress about the Real World soybean, I think you flat out ask if you planted Real World soybeans if that would not be a problem. So the Real World soybeans have 4 different soybeans in the blend, either 4 or 3 depending on the blend you get. And we do that to hedge our bets. So in certain conditions, weather conditions, a specific soybean variety may shatter. But we used 3 or 4 of the most shatter resistant varieties that we could find, so that if one of those varieties shattered, you still had 2 or 3 in your plot that did not shatter. The other thing we looked at was the oil content or the fat in those soybeans, and we picked shatter resistant soybeans with high oil content, which are more palatable to the deer. So I'm hesitant to say you plant Real World soybeans and your problems are all gone, because that might not be the case. Under certain conditions, one of those varieties in the mix may shatter, but you're still going to have the other 2 or 3 that did not shatter. So you would definitely be better off, because they're not all going to shatter.
Year to year, that's going to even change.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's not even the same per market. The other question he asked you, just so you make sure you touch on that, is if the beans do drop onto the ground, will they rot?
Absolutely. They will rot. Soybeans, I'm sure most listeners have seen soybeans that got wet and they swell. And if they're on top of the ground, they're not going to grow. They're going to swell and they're going to rot. So if they drop on the ground, that might be great for turkeys or pheasants or something like that. That'll pick them and eat them until they are rotten. But a deer is typically not going to go along and grab these soybeans out of the mud after they've dropped out of the pod and consume them.
So I'm going to spin the question a little bit different for you, Don. Usually when people talk about getting a farmer to leave something, they're talking about maybe a strip of the width of a bean head, or maybe their 12-row corn plant or corn head on the combine. This guy's saying that he has 20 to 25 acres that he's worked out a deal with. Maybe the other alternative, instead of having the farmer leave the property or leave the crop, is then he could plant a whole diversity program on that much ground, and then have what he wants and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, the thing that jumps out at me, if you've got a farmer willing to leave 25 or 30 acres, you got a special farmer, because most of them are not going to leave 25 or 30 acres.
Right.
I would work with that farmer, and maybe you provide him with the Real World soybeans to plant on a section of his farm, and you rent that acreage from him to leave the crop, but you provide the seed as well. And if he's willing to sell that many standing acres of crop, I'm guessing he's probably willing to work with you.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the layout of the field or what it looks like up there, but 25 acres, you might even be able to do some corn. I mean, but
Yep.
He's probably got spraying and herbicide, fertilizer applications and stuff that would all have to be worked out. As high tech as what farming has gotten with input costs and weed control, there's a lot to that comment that you would have to work out. But with 20, 25 acres, you could probably get creative in your deal with the farmer, by all means.
And he sounds like he's willing to work with you, so I'd be exploring that.
If not, let me know where it is. I'll work with him, because I've never found a farmer that was willing to do that for me.
That's pretty rare.
So, good question. Thank
Yep.
you.
So our next one comes from Tim Stutzman from Millington, Michigan. It says, Dear Don and Terry, so regarding wind, if you would hunt upwind from the deer and you would use deer scent such as buck balm, which I'm sure you've heard of, or vanilla, it would cover your scent plus attract. Would just like to have your thoughts on this. Thanks for the great podcast, Tim.
Is buck balm the spray can?
I think so.
I'm not sure.
So, what you're expecting to happen here, Tim, is you're expecting to throw this buck balm or whatever scent it is you're going to use out, and the wind will carry it and your scent, if I understand your question right, is going to be mixed with this other scent, but the deer is not going to be able to smell you, but he will smell the buck bomb. That's not going to happen. And the best way that I ever had it described with me, or to me, was, a deer's nose is so much more refined, or I guess that would be the word, than ours. It's hard for us to imagine this. So let's say you walk into your house and your wife is cooking a big pot of vegetable soup, and you walk in, and as soon as you get in the door, you smell that vegetable soup, and we're having vegetable soup for supper. Well, a deer takes an odor like that, and he doesn't smell vegetable soup. He smells carrots, he smells potatoes, he smells corn, he smells peas. He smells each one of those individuals. He can break it down. He's going to smell your human scent mixed with whatever it is you're trying to cover your scent up with. And I learned that years ago. Guys, I tried everything. Every scent product marketed to deer hunters. I tried the scent elimination sprays, the clothing. I tried the doe and heat scents. You name it, the vanilla cover scent type stuff. I tried it all, and I couldn't get it to work. Now, that's not saying that scents won't attract deer. A good scent applied properly can definitely attract deer, and will. I mean, we put the Smokies on our rope scrapes, and it attracts the bucks. But we're not standing there hanging the rope, off with our hand with the human scent blowing the same direction as the Smokies and thinking that Smokies is going to cover our scent. It just doesn't work like that. I'm not sure that there's anything that's going to cover human scent. My opinion. You agree?
I just don't think you're going to fool it. You can take precautions and try to make it better, but you're never going to fool it. And it's just how far you want to take that as part of the game that you want to do. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, go get some vanilla extract. People would be killing deer with vanilla extract behind their ears for the last 30 years, and it would have worked foolproof. But
yeah, I think the thing that, there's certain deer hunters out there that are uber successful. It's like when the hunting season starts, you expect that you're going to see a picture of this particular deer hunter with a big buck at some point in the season. They're just consistently successful killing mature deer. And if you know a hunter like that, it doesn't have to be a famous hunter. It doesn't have to be a big industry name. There's these guys all over the country that are consistently knocking down good deer year after year. And the best of those guys, I promise you, they respect a buck's nose. They play the wind. They respect that they cannot cover their scent. So they're making sure that their scent is blowing into a direction that they're not expecting the deer to come from. They're not trying to cover their human odor with some other scent on top of it. It's just not going to work.
Yep.
All right. One more. And this one, the guy didn't even use his real name, but I think we're going to know who it is.
Oh, boy.
This one comes from the mailman. The mailman.
He wants a new hat.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to leave you a new Osseo Gear Chasing Giants hat in the mailbox when I leave. How about that?
Awesome. I need to leave him some new Whitetail Life magazines too.
Okay.
I told him that I would do that the other day, and I forgot about it. So Stephen Polk is my mailman.
The mailman.
A great young man. I just respect him for a lot of things, his work ethic being one of them. But his question is, has there been an incident or situation that had brought both of you to walking away from deer hunting? If so, what kept you from doing so? You want to take this one first? You want me to?
Go ahead.
There was a situation with my first 200-inch buck. It was back in 2004, 19 years ago. Boy, hard to believe it's been almost 20 years. Where basically I was accused of wrongdoing and had the buck actually confiscated from me by the Illinois DNR. I had to hire an attorney to get my buck back. And when that incident first happened, I'd been writing magazine articles for a few years and gaining just a little bit of notoriety for such, not much, just, kind of a little bit. And I thought, and I had big dreams, in the hunting industry and such at that time. And I thought all my dreams just come crashing down over false accusations. And it hit me so hard that I considered walking away and never deer hunting again. And over the next, and that didn't really last that long, maybe 3 or 4 days. And then resolve kind of hit me. And I decided that, I did everything right shooting that deer. I'm not going to let someone, because of whatever issue they have with me personally or whatever, stop my passion. That passion of chasing big deer was just in me. It's ingrained in me. And I wasn't going to let, somebody else's issues stop that. And basically changed my whole life. Because if I'd have walked away from deer hunting 20 years ago, I don't know where I'd be today or what I'd be doing. And it was just that passion was so strong in me that I just wouldn't let it happen.
So for people who don't know the timeline of this, I met Don weeks after he got his deer back from the court case. And I've actually thought about this. We haven't talked about it. I look at it maybe even differently. That was a pivotal part not only in your hunting career, but also as your own business owner. Mm-hmm. Because at that point in time, you were starting you'd had the tree business for a while, but were starting to grow it. I think maybe that was a way that God used a way for your story, your name. It got people talking. Everybody around knew. We heard about the story in Kentucky, mm-hmm. and there was no social media back then. Mm-hmm. What year was that?
2004.
2004. So there is no Facebook. There's no Twitter and Snap. What was the other one Steve did? TikTok. There was no TikTok back then. And we heard about this story and actually met you at the Illinois Deer Show. And when we walked by it, I think Patrick was the one that said, that's the deer that got confiscated. And whether or not it helped or it hurt, you used it as an opportunity to drive you for something. When you make your mind up to do it, there's no pacing yourself. When you to a fault sometimes, mm-hmm. You're all in. So whether it was a situation God used to fuel your fire, to get people to maybe say, who is this Don Higgins guy? I think it all worked out in the end. Mm-hmm. It was a long time ago.
It did, and I shy away today. I talked about it for a lot of years. I was a little bit bitter for a while, and I shy away from talking about it today because of the other people that were involved, the people that were trying to destroy me. I hope that whatever animosity they had towards me is over. To this day, I don't hold any animosity towards them. I have no idea what drove them to do what they did. I wish them nothing but the best. I do think that there's a scripture that I wish I could remember where it's at and exactly how it goes, but it goes something like, what they meant for bad, I turned to good. And that's exactly what happened here. And in fact, for a few years after this incident, when I would speak at church events or whatever, I had a slide with the picture of this deer, and I had that scripture on that slide. And ironically, I was just starting to get a little tiny bit of recognition for my magazine articles as an outdoor writer. And this incident that I went through just exploded. Everything exploded. Right after that, I wrote my first book. That first book sold out the first printing in less than 6 months. I had to do a second printing. It gave me more name recognition almost instantly. If I'd just shot that 200-inch buck and wrote an article about it and that was it, I would have never, ever got the notoriety that I got from the incident. And again, I want to really stress this. I do not harbor any ill will towards the people who are behind this. That was 20 years ago almost. I've matured a great deal in the last 20 years. I think everybody has. Everybody that's alive today is not the same person they were 20 years ago. And I'll just leave it at that. There's no hard feelings to this day, at least on my end. And
I actually made a Facebook post similar to Steven's question this morning. We're recording this on Saturday night, so I got to the deer stand today. So today, we've talked about me changing my job, so I'm not prepared. None of my stuff is organized. Today was my actual first sit in a tree stand. I've hunted in a blind a few times at home, but drove up to Illinois on Friday night to hunt Saturday morning. Southwest wind. We have a perfect spot for it. And so I went in, had not been in the tree. And this is actually kind of funny. So I get up in the tree, tether in. Have you ever tried to take a limb hanger, bow holder that's been used before and try to screw it in a hard maple tree?
We have a good screw.
I'm dripping with sweat trying to get this thing. You guys know what it's like. Everything's harder to do in the dark with one hand. You're up in the tree. It's dark. You got trying to use minimal light, reaching around the side trying to screw this thing in, just struggling like you wouldn't believe. And finally got it in. And luckily I was really early, so I settle in my stand. And right before first light, I get this urge to pee. And I'm like, there's been a cell camera there showing this buck not too long after first light. I'm like, I better get this out of the way because this is going to hit me bad. So I stand up, literally first light, and got the whatchamacallit out, letting it go.
I gotta ask, did you whip it?
Whip it. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear this, and I don't know about you guys, but when you're relaxed enough to let things go, it's really hard to clamp them down. So I finally got it stopped, and I'm like, what was that? And it was dead silence, and I'm like, okay, let it go again. And I hear, and I thought, oh crap. So, you finish up what you're doing, you hit the little button on your vacuum cleaner where the cord goes winding back up real quick, get everything put together, get your bow, and I turn around, and a trespasser is walking into my spot. I guess he thought it was a good spot too to hunt. It wasn't a buck, so I peed on myself for no reason other than a trespasser. So, so had that conversation, and to make a long story short, I struggle with the people side of this. Hunting has become such a rich man's sport where there's not enough property for the people that want to do it, the people that are rooting in and doing things. I mean, I have to worry about, I texted Don and Wes and Dwayne in our group text. I said, he walked away, but my tires are probably slashed. You worry about, now is he going to come in there tonight and score the straps on my tree stand? I mean, people that are malicious like that and not respectful of anything, I get to the point every now and then with dealing with other people that sometimes I think, is this even worth it? And this is why, people get offended when I say this. And I don't mean it to be offensive. I'm not wired to do public land hunting. I can't do it. I totally respect the guys that do and take that extra challenge because it is more challenging. But I just can't deal with it. I'm not mature enough. I'm not strong enough. I don't know what the right word is, but I can't deal with people being disrespectful. And I know part of the challenge of public land is like a root hog or die situation out there, trying to outwit the other guy there. Mm-hmm. And so much of what I want to do as hunting is develop habitat and grow a deer herd, not just big bucks, but a deer herd. And so even just this morning, I'm not saying it's going to push me away from hunting, but anything through this process, there is not one big deer, there is not a 200-inch deer, there's not a booner, there's not a 150 that is worth losing a friend over, that's worth doing something unethical or against the law to just get a leg up on people. But unfortunately, not many people feel that way. And whether it's trespassers or people that'll screw over their best friend or get upset about something, I'll not hunt if it means protecting a friendship or doing the right thing. And unfortunately, there's too many people that aren't like that. But that's where I struggle with the sport today.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a dark place, honestly, when it comes to that.
Well, I've said many times that deer hunting, the best thing deer hunting did for me is the people that it's brought into my life.
Mm-hmm.
Some great relationships. Right here's one of them. But some of the worst things that's happened to me has been
The people.
Some of the situations. I mean, when you've got a person that at one time was good friends with you, and I'm not directing this at anyone. I don't want anybody to read more into this than what I'm saying, because I'm not directing it at any specific person. But when you've been friends with someone for a number of years, and they turn around and their jealousy about your success causes them to make accusations that are not even close to the truth, that bothers me.
Yeah.
And what worse can you do to somebody than try to tarnish their reputation because you're jealous of them? Yeah. And I've had that happen on a couple of occasions with a couple of different people. I'm not going to point fingers at anybody. It's just sad that the greatest thing deer hunting has done for me is the people it's brought into my life, and some of the worst things that happened in my life are some of the people that I've had to deal with through deer hunting.
Yeah, I mean, every time someone shoots a giant, the attack, and not you. Mm-hmm. Anytime someone kills a giant, it just opens the floodgates for that. So I think the takeaway from Steven's question is you have to do it for your own pace, your own speed, your own goals, and don't be that guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, come on. I mean, this guy this morning drove a four-wheeler past 2 trucks on a small property and then acted surprised that I was in the stand. Mm-hmm. You don't think that I'm going to check those straps the next time I climb up in that tree? Well, don't be that person.
Well, we got to treat each other the way we want to be treated. Mm-hmm. And I was talking this week to a young man, a deer hunter, and he was a little bit, I wouldn't say he was upset, he maybe was a little bit frustrated because he had a permission property, not a big property, but a permission property. There was a buck on that property that he'd been watching and had his sights set on. And he comes to find out just this week that the landowner gave someone else permission to hunt that farm also. And this guy that just got permission was told that this other person was already there. And yet, even though it's a small property, hey, I got permission, I'm going to go hunting. Without regard, there was probably a time where I would have done the same. But in recent years, I can tell you that I've got permission on properties. And when I got permission, I was told, yeah, somebody else might be there as well.
I'm out.
Yeah, you walk away from it. And, the whole idea that we need to be recruiting more hunters is something I've got a big issue with. And I think we've talked about this before a little bit. But the hunting industry, if you will, and when I say industry, I mean those making money off of hunting, push this idea that we need to be recruiting more hunters. Hunter numbers are declining. We need to recruit more. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know where we're going to put anymore because habitat keeps disappearing, and the last thing I need in my county is 100 more deer hunters.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
But that's 100 more crossbows and tree saddles for somebody to sell.
Absolutely.
Ooh, that's going to get some comments. For people who don't know that sarcasm, Don posted a picture yesterday calling Steve Shields a clown, saying, look at the clown I'm in the blind with last night. And Steve had up a picture or holding one of his mechanical broadheads. And I've never seen more engagement in one of your posts, but in reality, what Don was doing was poking fun at the whole situation because never once has he told Steve he had to hunt with a different broadhead. Mm-hmm. But we're still going to poke fun at things as friends and have a good time. Yeah. He poked fun at me about my little Debbies tonight.
I seen that, but just the fact that, and I never said anything about his broadhead.
No, you just called him a clown.
Well, in the blind, he is. I seen he had mechanical broadhead. I never said a word. That's his choice. I got an opinion, but I'm not going to try to force my opinion on all my friends. And I seen he knocked his arrow and had a mechanical broadhead, and I wasn't going to say a word. And he's the one that started the discussion, and we're giving each other a hard time as friends. And I said, hold that thing up there. I need to take a picture of that for a social media post. But I think enough of him as a friend, as well as you and anybody else that's here hunting, that I'm not. When I invite you here, it's not to brainwash you into thinking the same way I do. You don't. Okay, let me go over your equipment. Oh, mechanical broadheads, that's out. Crossbow, that's out.
You sat in the blind with me on this farm with a crossbow.
Exactly. Man. So think about that, folks. I've had mechanical broadheads sitting right next to me in my blind on my farm. Never said a word, never wanted to belittle my friends in any way. Terry here has been on my farm with a crossbow sitting right next to him. I never said a word.
Never said anything.
That doesn't mean, what bothers me, and I got some of this today, I got a message today that I had to reply to, is people think that I'm not entitled to, or some people seem to think that I am not entitled to an opinion. That I have to keep my mouth shut and go with the flow and everything's fine and dandy. That's what's wrong with this country today.
Just get your rainbow flag tied around your neck and go parading around up and down the street.
Yeah, and let's go to the abortion clinic and kill babies and everything else, because everything goes, everything's fine. Let's not offend each other.
Wow, that went sideways on us really quick. All right, so let's talk about the upcoming week. People are going to watch this on Sunday. Most of the Midwest is going to have a heat wave come through Monday through. Actually, it's starting now. It got hot today, but we're going to see that through Wednesday. Front changes, temperature drop. That means probably big pressure change and wind direction change. I haven't looked that far out. If you have flexibility in your vacation, I know I'm probably looking at moving my vacation to the end of the week.
Yeah, and the bad thing about all this, the timing, is that I preach November 7th and 8th every year. Yeah. November 7th and 8th, there's more booners killed historically than any other dates. That's the dates when the giants are typically on the move. And this year, it just so happens that those two dates are the warmest days.
Lows of 58, 59, and highs of 78. So yeah. We'll see.
And weather trumps everything. Remember, weather trumps everything. So that movement that we typically see November 7th and 8th, it's going to be suppressed. The weather, I promise you, take it to the bank, the weather is going to suppress.
There's going to be big ones shot.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be big ones shot, but you gotta play that card. So hopefully you're off. The best thing is if you're off all week.
Right.
You still get to hunt the 7th and the 8th, and you still get to hunt the cold front going into the week. I know a lot of rifle seasons open up on Saturday, and then the following week, I think later on that week, we got the opener of gun season here.
Right.
And I think the grandkids are coming back for another crack at some management bucks on the property.
Yep, Wyatt and Walker will be back for that November gun season, see what we can get shot. And just, wish everybody the best this coming week. It's if I could reverse that weather trend, and if I could have that cold front at the beginning of the week and then warm up at the end.
See, the warm front on lockdown would be a whole lot better, wouldn't it?
Right. Yep.
And then back cold again after lockdown. But
it'll be what it'll be.
We'll see. Make sure you're watching the Rut Report every day. You're giving updates about what not only you see, but you hear from others, and obviously as many cell cameras as you're running. That can be found on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now. Where else?
I think he might even be posting it to YouTube. Steve Shields is doing the posting a part of it, and me. And the other thing I'll throw out is we're doing those weekly rut forecast videos released every Sunday evening on the Whitetail Master Academy. And in those videos, I'm looking at four things. I'm looking at the calendar and what the rut typically, what's happening during those dates typically on the rut or during the rut. And then I'm looking at the weather for that coming week. What's the weather and how's it going to impact the hunting that week? Then I look at the tactics I'm going to be using that week. For my morning hunt, is it going to be different than the afternoon hunt? And what exactly I'm going to be doing on each of those hunts as far as tactics go. And then the last thing that I do is I share a story of a buck I killed in previous seasons during that particular week of November. So it's a 5-week series. We just had the first one released last Sunday. The next one will be released this Sunday. You can go to the Whitetail Master Academy and you can see all our back videos, dozens of videos. And if you want to see that weekly rut prediction, if you will, it's there.
Yeah, and one more thing, check out the Sunday Night Prayer Time on Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel. Wes Delks is back up this week. I got to watch this young man. I'm convinced that this guy's calling, no matter what his occupation is serving the Lord and sharing the good news of Jesus. You're not going to want to miss that, so make sure you tune into that. They've been really, really good every week. I don't know if you've been able to catch all of them. Harold Monk, the owner of Wise Eye, did it last week and talked about creation, and you're not going to want to miss Wes Delks coming up this week, so check that out.
Wes Delks is a young man that I'm telling you, God's got big plans for that guy, because I don't think I've ever met anyone his age that held my feet to the fire in such a humble and just down-to-earth way. It's not like he led by example. He didn't come in and preach to us, hey guys, we need to do this, we need to do that. He led by example, and I'm so proud of him.
Yep, he's a good friend. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in. You might see this style of podcast the next couple of weeks, depending on how much I'm in town versus being back at home. And we're actually going to change some platform stuff for you guys, so hopefully get a little bit better quality. But for right now, I'm ready to turn these lights off because they're really hot, shining on my face.
Yep. God bless everyone. Have a great week, and good luck in the deer woods this week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Buy a Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.